Ted. It's just like 20-minute drive for me, but yeah, decisions. That what's interesting? I was actually listening to a podcast, the Emma Greedy and Bozoma St. John, and so Bozoma, she's like a marketing person and etc., and she had like a really successful career. And she said something about decisions that I thought was really powerful, and it's like a mindset shift. Was if you make a decision or whatever is happening, you just make it great. Because Emma like asked her like, have you ever made a decision you regretted or something? She's like, no. She's like, whatever decision I made or whatever has happened, I just make it great. I make it the best decision that I could make. And I love that. What do you think about that?
I think if you had asked me this question 10 or 15 years ago, I think I would have answered it completely in a different way. But now sitting here at 45, with everything that's happened in life, the ups, the downs, and everything in between, yeah, that also that speaks to me in volumes because if I were to take a perfect example, I made the wrong decision by choosing the wrong partner, but I got the right child and the
Mm-hmm.
right person to be a mother to, you know? So yeah, it completely makes sense to me because if you sit and think about it, and again, it goes back to like the victim mindset that a lot of us can get sucked into if we don't take care of our mind properly, you could very much think of poor decisions, bad decisions, incorrect decisions in a very negative way, and it could really take you down. But if you take that decision or make that decision and then you own it, I think one of the things that I am now so intentional about is owning my shit. If I made a decision instead of it before, and even the language in which I speak to myself, because as I told you, I like to talk to myself. So before, when I used to speak to myself, maybe I was very harsh in the way I thought about decisions that I'd made in the past. But now when I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, had I not made that decision, I wouldn't be here. Like when I sit here right now in June 2026, every single decision that I've made, all of the bad and all of the good have brought me here. So I've made the best of it. Getting into leaving my job, quitting my job in 2024 and not having another job. If you ask a normal, sane person, they tell you never leave a good job without actually having another job in hand. That's a really stupid
Mm.
decision to make, but that's a decision I made because I chose my mental and physical health. And as a result of that, let's say bad decision, what I did was I made good on it by pushing myself into entrepreneurial endeavors. And, it took me on a path that I never thought I would be able to go down. So, yeah, I wholeheartedly
Mm.
agree with that. It's a right way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I do think there's like this experience age piece to it because when I talk to a lot of younger people, I work with a lot of younger people, and they're just so stressed out about choosing the right career or something like that. And I'm like nothing, like worst case scenario, you'll just change your career. Like that's the worst case scenario that will happen. And that's like a practice I use all the time is I look at like, okay, what is the worst case scenario if I make this decision? And so that's
Yeah.
like my evaluation for myself is to say like, okay, if I'm not sure about something, what is the absolute worst thing that will happen? And usually the worst thing that will happen is like nothing dramatic compared to what I've been through. Like I've been broke more than once. You know what I'm saying? I've been alone. I haven't had a like my own space. You know what I'm saying? Like I haven't, like I haven't had a job at one point. Like I was just relying on my own kind of income. And like if I get a gig, I get a gig. If not, then not. So it's like all the worst case scenarios are usually around like finances, right? Or I don't know, being alone or something like that. And if that's the worst case, is like finances don't go right or something like that,
Yeah.
that's like nothing compared. Like so it's like you're still able, as long as you're healthy, you can probably make it work. As long as
Yeah.
you're healthy and you have a brain and you're willing to work your ass off to get to whatever you need to be, like you'll be okay. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, at least in my case, it was always like worst case was around like these fixable things, these temporary downtimes versus something dramatic, right? So, yeah.
I also think that, there's one thing that's inevitable, and not to sound morbid, but the one thing that's inevitable is death, right? You know that at
Mm.
some point that's
And
coming
taxes.
for you,
What is
right?
that thing? Death. What is it? The two certain things in life: death and taxes.
I don't know about that. I live in the UAE. No, we pay tax as well, but in a different way than you guys. But yeah, but so like, I think when we are younger, we're also programmed to kind of like map out the trajectory of our lives. And when you map everything out, you don't kind of think, oh, there's going to be a monkey wrench that's going to be thrown into it. And sometimes when that monkey wrench can be either for yourself or for somebody who's a loved one, something related to health or illness, or unfortunately losing someone, that really completely shakes you to your core. And then it also puts a lot of things into perspective, where, as you said, what is the worst thing or worst case scenario? If you really think about it, it is no longer being here, right?
Right.
That's the worst
Yeah.
scenario.
That's
You're
in
no
all cases, yes.
Yeah, in all cases, the common denominator is that I'm not gonna be here, or X or Y is not gonna be here. So, I mean, and look, I'm not very good with death because it's so final. Even every time I have to like wish somebody condolences, I do it in a very meaningful way. But I always think about, the funny thing is, like, the person who's passed on, I wonder what they're feeling. And it's a weird thing because you become a soul and you go to where you're supposed to. So how would that even, like, what would that feeling feel like? But what it comes down to is that you're no longer here. And when you accept the fact that that thing or that person is no longer here, you kind of feel like everything else that is in your life is like, what's the worst case scenario? You know, I've gone through so much. I've been very, very blessed that I have not, knock on wood, had to deal with a lot of loss in terms of losing a loved one in my life. But when my auntie passed away last year, it was like the first time as a grown adult that somebody so close to me was no longer a part of my life. And my auntie didn't had moved back to Iran. But you know, when it's like somebody who, like, there's literally
In
like
your life, yeah.
in your life and they're no longer there, because we used to send messages to each other on WhatsApp and like check on each other and stuff like that. And I now, when I sit and listen to her voice notes, I'm just like, wow, that's no longer there. So some days when
Yeah.
I'm having certain problems, you know, or where I'm just completely stressing myself out about the fact that, how am I here, or I should have done better, or I made really bad decisions, or no, I shouldn't have done this instead of that. And I sit and think to myself, well, I'm still here. I'm still physically here, right? I still got blessed with waking up this morning or that morning, and I got a chance to open my eyes and I got a chance to do it again, you know? This period of the last 6 months, where it took me a really, really long time to get the engine running again when it came to my career, at first, it was incredibly stressful because everything, as you said, is about money, money, money. Whenever you don't have a livelihood, the only thing you think of is money. And then as time was passing by, I kept on trying to rewire my brain, and I kept on trying to help myself think in a different way. And every day that passed by, I just kept on having this sort of like thing that kept on tapping on my shoulder saying, maybe for the last or past decade, you have been working so hard, nonstop, just going and going and going and going, that maybe this is a way in which the universe is telling you, calm down, wake up and don't rush. Go and grab your coffee and enjoy it. Sit down and talk to people and not rush the conversation. Enjoy it. Be present. Be present for yourself. Forget anybody else. Be present for yourself. And every time that mindset started to come to me, like, no, but you know, other people are moving ahead in their careers, or this person has done this and I haven't done that, I kept thinking to myself, like, man, what's the worst case scenario? I'm still here. I am still here. So whatever bad decision that I've made that has gotten me here, I'm still here. I still get to wake up every day, you know? So I think people,
Mhm.
we need to remind ourselves of that, you know, being alive and being present is the greatest blessing. And having a healthy body and a healthy mind is another one of like God's blessings that a lot of people take for granted.
Mm. Amen to that. I think if we should just, I mean, it's a great reminder because I think we're so caught up in like the next thing and the next thing that we forget that just being alive is enough. You know, like it's enough. And I mean, granted, listen, I mean, I have to say caveat, like if you're currently in like war torn countries where so much is out of your control, different story, right? But if you're
Yeah.
just in a normal, safe country, you know, you have a roof over your head, you have your health, etc. Like the rest is really up to you. It's just a matter of time, and that matter of time meaning like what are you going to do with that chance of being alive every day and having another chance to try again, having another chance to try, and maybe you fail, maybe you succeed. And I think it's a mindset. Like for me, it's a mindset thing. And I think you develop that mindset. And I mean, frankly speaking, I think the earlier on you can have those what's the word? Not so great experiences. I think it builds up the resilience muscles. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if you never failed until you're like in your 40s, and then you fail and you're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. This is where we have so many people commit suicide and just go
Yeah.
completely bananas because they don't know what to do with this uncertainty that they found themselves in because their whole life has been like cushioned by whatever reason. So I think the earlier on we can face that adversity, the more you fail and the more you try things. I think that's what I always give credit to. I'm like, no matter what happens, like worst case scenario, like, oh, it's fine, I'll just start over again. Like it will suck, I don't want to, but like whatever. Like I can do it again because I've done it before. And I
But
think
I
that
think
is
it's
so
also our
powerful.
conditioning. When we go to school at a young age, at least I can see that actually I see that a lot in the way the education in which my daughter's receiving and in the way in which I went to school. When I was in school, failing was such a big deal. Failing was so bad that if I failed a math test, I had to bring home that failed test. I had to get my mom or my dad to sign it to show them that I had failed. I had to take that signature to prove to my teachers that I had shown my mom and dad that I had failed, and it was made into this huge shaming thing almost like you failed. But when I think about it now, if my kid isn't good at a certain subject and I find out that she is, let's say, failing, I don't think of it as something to shame her by or to be like, this is the worst thing that can happen to you. I have to sit and think about why is it that she can't grasp this concept? Because at the end of the day, if she's being taught something, she's not grasping it for a reason. It could be it's just not her thing. It could be that it's not being taught properly to her, or that her way of understanding requires a few extra steps. So I think we're conditioned from the very beginning to think of failure as something incredibly detrimental and negative to our human existence. But if you don't fail, you never learn. You
Yeah.
absolutely have no way of understanding what the tough times are like if you haven't failed at something. You need to fail to grow stronger. You really do. If I hadn't failed at so many, I mean, come on, besides math, I failed at marriage. I absolutely failed at marriage. Not because I didn't have the intent of being a good partner or a good wife. I failed because I chose the wrong person. And that was my failure. And every time I thought about it and I spoke about it in a failure mentality. But
Yeah.
now, thinking about it a decade later, I'm so proud of the fact that I failed, because where my life is at right now is 100 times. Maybe I don't have the financial resources when I was single and a working woman for myself, or the resources I had in the short time that I was married, but my life is in so many ways more abundant now after that failure, after the fact. Because every time I failed at something, I learned something and I gained something in return. Fear always brought me some lesson, and that's a victory. So through the
Hmm.
failure, I succeeded. So it's almost like judo. I kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's hard to see it when you're in it, but every time you fail, you've gained some sort of experience. And experience is such an important currency to have in your
Hmm.
lifetime.
But you see, this is my thing though, that it's a mindset thing, and you recognize that failure is an opportunity to learn, and not everybody's like that. And this is like a big question for me. Always like, what is it? What is it where some people, when they fail, sometimes they just retreat to their spaces, or they become just like a hater who's just miserable. And because they failed, they didn't succeed, and they just kind of stayed in that miserable space and they never came out of it, and now they're just like person who's just hating on everything else everybody else is doing instead of just addressing the core issues with themselves. And I wonder what that is. I wonder where that comes. I wonder if it's an upbringing. I wonder if it's genetic, the mindset piece. I wonder if it's environment. Like, what is it? Because there are a lot of people, I mean, just go to the comments section on any podcast. I go to the comments section because one, I think the internet is hilarious. So I think there's a lot of hidden comics. But two, sometimes you just like, how miserable are people? You know what I mean? Like to go and like, you know what I'm saying? To just, dump shit on somebody because they disagree with them. And to me, it goes to fundamental lack of happiness, joy, fulfillment in their life. And that means they never, do you know what I'm saying? That means they never like learn from the experience and try to make their life better. And they just stayed in this whatever has happened to them, they just stayed in this drowning of, I don't know,
Well, I
quicksand of
think it
crap.
depends on if you're how are you living your life? Are you living your life for yourself? Are you living your life for what people want you to live your life for? And to also go back a little bit more in terms of what you were saying. How are people like that? I think it also has to do a lot with the people you surround yourself with. I'm incredibly
Yeah.
blessed that I was about to say breast. I'm incredibly blessed.
That too. You are blessed
I don't
with the
know what it
breasts.
is on this. I don't know what it is with this podcast, but my tongue keeps twisting, and I'm just like, God damn it. But yeah, I'm incredibly blessed that I have a very small handful of people who just always check me. And I think it's important to have people who will check you. Now, there's some people who will do it in a really, really harsh way, just give it to you honest, which I think everybody needs in life. My kid's one of those people. She gives it to me honest. And I appreciate
Yeah.
that about her. And then I have people like yourself where, even if you're going to allow me to have one of those moments where I come to you and I just I'm literally vomiting emotions, but at the same time you're still going to keep it real with me and pull me in a space where I don't go down to the depths of victimhood and I don't become bitter, you know? I think it's important who you surround yourself with, because if you're
Yeah.
surrounded by people who are always going to point out that you failed and you messed up, well then how are you going to ever allow yourself the space to grow, you know? But if you're around people who be like, yes, you messed up. You really did. But this doesn't define you. You know,
Hmm.
you messed up. And I'll tell you, my entire family, my mom, my dad, my sister had the right to say, we told you so. Because all of them told me, don't do it. This is the wrong decision. Don't marry this person. That's not the right person for you. But hey, man, I just had to do what I had to do. And that mindset I was a different person back then. I wanted this lifestyle and I
Yeah.
allowed myself to be manipulated, and I chose not to see the things that when I look at right now, I'd be like, "Girl, what were you smoking?" But again, had I not done that, I wouldn't be here. And they had the right to say, "I told you so," so many times. But they never did, because ultimately they loved me so much that they just wanted to protect me. And I saw that happen after I decided to leave and rebuild my life. So I think your community, your village, the people who you know in times of emergency, in times of grief, in times of pain, you can go to and they will hold you up instead of pulling you down. That's also a part of it. You got to have those kinds of
Mm.
people in your life. You got to have people who will help you stand up and rebuild yourself. And sometimes rebuilding might come with really harsh conversations that you have to have with people, but it's those conversations that will help you get back on track. So your mindset, your environment, your village, how you see yourself, where you want to go, where you want to take yourself. And again, all of this is nice to say for this podcast, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. And just like somebody who's trying to kick a habit, whatever that habit is, you're going to fall off the wagon, you know? It's
Mhm.
just, if you fall off, you got to remember that you're not going to go down to the pit again. You just got to keep on going at it, until you get to a point where you've made peace with it. And you'll know when you've made peace with something, you will know, because it will no longer irk your soul. When it comes to knock on your door, it will no longer bother you the way it used to.
100%. 100%. That's I relate to that so much. That's a sign, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Actually, I think that's an excellent point. But I also like think about like also when I got married, that decision that I made, even if like even if I would have listened to somebody who's like, "Don't do it," I don't think anybody was like really saying that to me. I'm trying to remember, but like it was like I think everybody's pretty on board with it. But nonetheless, like even if they did, I probably wouldn't have listened because I have my own journey to fulfill, and I think if I would have listened then, I would have made another shitty decision. It was just a matter of my growth. I just like you know what I'm saying? Like it was part of my growth. Like I had to be in that situation. So like yeah, and like I mean that decision with my ex-husband, like it took me to Dubai, which got me to meet you and how and like you know what I'm saying, and just like have this whole other life. You know what I mean? Like I would have never. I mean, I always remember like, what if I wouldn't have made that decision to marry this guy? I would have never moved to Dubai, which wasn't really my plan, but it just happened that he was going back home. And it was like, do you know what I'm saying? Like I always
Yeah.
wonder like what would have happened because I mean, yeah, it's just I so that was also although looking back, I'm like I'm so glad I made that decision actually because what if I didn't? If I didn't spend that time in Dubai, my life would be completely different right now. Maybe for the worst, maybe for the best, we'll never know, unless I
Yeah.
get reincarnated as my old self or we have the sliding door movie moment where I can go back and feel like what if I didn't make that decision? That with Gwyneth Paltrow, that sliding door movie where
Oh,
she
I
misses
can't
the
stand
train.
her.
It's a really good, it's a really good movie back in like in the 90s where there's a moment where she catches the train and then a moment she
Okay.
doesn't, and how her life plays
Life
out based on
changes.
where what based, and it's like two parallel lives, etc. But anyway, it's a good movie, old movie,
Well,
but
look,
very good movie. Yeah.
I know what you mean because sometimes I sit and think of the decisions that I made that brought me here, and then I think to myself, what would Bahari's life be like if I had never been this person? If I had continued on my path and I had never gotten married, never become a mother, never had this responsibility, and what would the trajectory be like? Would I still be in Dubai? I really don't know, but again, I truly believe in God's design. I think I'm not a very religious person, but I do believe in my religion, and I do believe in God wholeheartedly and very very deeply. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that everything that's happened in my life has been because of God's divine design. And I think if He has wanted me to be abundant, there was a reason for it. If He wanted me to kind of feel a little bit of sparsity or scarcity in my life, there was a reason for it. So as time has passed by, that's one thing that I no longer question anymore. I no longer say, why did this happen to me? Or why did that have to happen? You know, I think that's an important place to get to in life where you don't question the things that happen to you. You know, you just take it as this was meant to. There are reasons that you make decisions. And when you make those decisions, and sometimes those decisions don't have the outcomes that you expected them, you sit and question yourself as to why did I make this decision? But then sometimes time passes by, or a whole bunch of time passes by, and you sit back and you look at everything that happened from that point of the decision to like maybe a couple of years later, and you're like, that's why that decision had to be made in that way, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And when I again not going into too much detail because it's not my story, but when my mom got sick, I was driving, well, I was working and going back and forth to Abu Dhabi, and I had just left, and I left the job because I told you I couldn't manage the drive. But then because of her illness, I had to do that road again. But this time it was because I needed to take her back and forth to the destination she needed to go. And I always say this, had I not made that decision to take that job, I would not have built up the strength to do that drive.
Mm.
Right. And I needed to be strong for that drive. And I needed to experience that drive all those days and weeks and months that I did it to be able to be strong enough to do it. So it's just a matter of that every decision that you make will lead you either to a positive outcome or to a negative outcome. But I don't think it's the outcome. It's the fact that, as cliche as it is, it's not the destination, it's the journey. So it's not the decision. It's what do you get out of that decision? What
Yeah.
what did that decision bring you to? How did it change you as a person? What did it make you learn? What did it reveal to you about yourself? And I think we need to hold ourselves accountable for a lot of things. We are so used to blaming other people for the bad decisions, the good decisions, whatever. We're just used to but you point a finger like this, but there's like
Yeah.
the three pointing back at you. But yeah, I mean, nobody put a gun to my head to make certain decisions, but I have to accountability. I think that a lot of times people are too afraid and lack maturity to take accountability. And one of the most important factors of decision making is accountability. Because if you fail, you have to be accountable for that failure.
Mm. I totally agree, and that's where I think like that point you made earlier, where the decisions you make after like once you make peace of them, they sting a little bit less. Because I think in the beginning, it's always like you always feel like whether it's shame or embarrassment about a specific decision, right? Like, and then like you don't want to talk about it when people ask you, well, you're like, I don't want to have this conversation type thing. You try to avoid it. Maybe sometimes you sugarcoat the situation and so on. But I think you get to a point where like, yep, that was me. I messed up, and like, how stupid was that? Like, sometimes you just make a stupid decision, you know what I mean? Like, God, I can count handful of those for me, more than a handful for myself. But it was like, that was just a stupid decision. And then it stinks for a while, and then eventually, like, once you make peace with it yourself, then nobody can use it against you. Nobody can throw it in your face. And people can ask whatever questions they want about you and so on. So it's like, and I think you become less emotionally attached to your decisions the older you get. I think in your 20s, everything's just emotional, dramatic, and you're just embarrassed and you feel stupid and all of that jazz. 30s is like, also you have your moments. And then I think like as I'm turning 40 soon, I'm like, I really like, I just don't care. Like, not that I don't care, but like, I just care, like, I care about my own opinion, but, like, if I make a decision and it doesn't, like, it's on me, like, and I know that nobody actually cares as much about it as I do, and, like, as long as I'm okay with it, it doesn't really matter, type thing. So it's like, it's just
But also
interesting
but
to,
also
through
remember
age.
how there are just like there are women like us or men like us who are very good decision makers. Imagine that there are people out there in the world who can't make a decision to save their lives.
Oh, yeah, that
There's a
too.
totally
Yeah.
opposite side of the spectrum where, like, they just can't make a decision. For me, when I
Yeah.
think about it, there's never been a day in my life where I haven't been able to make a decision. Like, and I
Yeah.
will for that decision, I'll have option A, B, C, and all the way down to the last letter of the alphabet. Again, it comes down to how you're conditioned, how your family was, what your role within the family. Everything. You're a blank slate when you are born. So you unfortunately are programmed. It's not a negative thing. It's just that you pick up the things that are left around and drop around you as you go through your different stages in life, and your family is a fundamental part of that. I grew up in a dojo my entire life. So at a very, very young age, both of my parents gave me a very big responsibility. One, take care of your sister who was 6 years younger than me. And then two, when I was like, what, 15, 16, I was teaching at the dojo with my dad. You have to be a decision maker because you have to have a certain amount of like authority. But then you meet people in life who are making the most basic decision, like what am I going to eat for dinner? Is maybe something that's difficult for them.
Yeah.
Or
Let
I,
alone a life decision or something.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've never had a hard time choosing what to eat. If eating was a sport, I'd be an Olympian. But like, I mean, just what I'm saying is that again, not to shame people. I hope
Right,
people
right.
don't watch. Like, I say a lot of things, and it comes across as matter of fact. I joke a lot, and because I say things very passionately, people might be like, "Man, she's being." I'm not. I'm not. I'm just saying I respect people for the way that they are. Maybe I can't relate to them because it's just not a part of my personality, but I do often wonder what it must be like just not to be able to make a decision. Just like what I also wonder what it would be like to be somebody who doesn't plan things and who is more spontaneous and just, doesn't need to have a decision in place and just can like just, roll with it, which I've gotten
Mhm.
better at as I have gone on in life and become more seasoned, I think when you are younger, you are right. There's a lot more emotions involved, less accountability, and you just maybe don't have that confidence within yourself. I think how you choose your career and what path you go down, because at the beginning of it, decision making is very difficult. But as you get on and you go into more senior positions where people are looking to you for decision making and you own that, then you get comfortable in that. That's why there are some people who are managers and bosses, and there are other people who are leaders. Leaders know how to make decisions because sometimes you have to make a tough decision in a very, very tough situation. And that decision could impact people positively or negatively, right? But a leader
Mhm.
makes a decision, good, bad, or indifferent, they make a decision, whatever that is. So I always sit and think to myself, what would it be like not to have this insane, innate desire to make decisions on a daily basis?
We will never know because I'm also a planner and I need to get things done. Okay. I have a schedule, I have a structure. We have
Yeah.
plans, we have goals, we have dreams, and that's the only way I know how to get to places. So yeah, no, I think, and yeah, to your point about leadership for sure. Like, and not only do you need to make a decision, but you need to make it fast as well. And I think speed is like half of the, because sometimes like a lot of, I'm just thinking like some decisions that I made, like some of them, like it's a timing thing. Like if you don't make that decision, you'll miss out on an opportunity on whatever, maybe on a relationship, whatever it is. Like, and I think for people who struggle with making decisions, I think it probably goes back to, I mean, can I put my therapist hat on for a second, my made up one? It probably goes back to some decision they made that didn't work out, and then it kind of paralyzed them to now be so afraid to make the next decision. So I think it probably stems from something like that, right?
Mm.
Or it's like super analytical people. I work with a lot of these people who just like need 2-3 days to process information, and that's purely just how their brain works, and they have to go through the process. But that's also not how you grow fast in life or become in a leadership position, because you do need to have a specific mindset to succeed in certain areas, like, but Anyway, yeah, it's interesting. It just comes down to that mindset. And I think people who are listening who's like, well, I want to be better at decision making, or I want to be better about my mindset. I think low hanging fruit here is like change your network, like change your environment. I think like
Yeah.
that's where it's at. Like if there was like a piece of gem from this conversation, it's just like, how do you change your mindset? Be around people whose mindset is what you want. Do you know what I'm saying? Be around people who are decision made. Be around people who are not afraid of failure. Be around people who are like, just approach things with a more, forward thinking, growth mindset versus fixed or fear based mindset. I think that's a huge thing. I think you said it earlier. Environment, in my opinion, is such a big part of everything of who we are, how we operate, all of that environment.
Yeah, but also you have to take time for yourself as well. We are constantly bombarded with information. We're constantly, again, depends on what part of the world you live in, but our lives in general have gotten busier, right? It's also important to be able to sit silently within yourself and with yourself to be able to declutter your mind where if you do need to make, I remember one of my, I told you, there are people in my tribe that have been with me for a very, very long time. You're one of them. My sister's one of them. I have a very, very good friend who we became friends in Vancouver. And I remember we were very close to graduating from university and she was basically trying to figure out, do I stay in Vancouver or do I move to Dubai? Because I had decided I wanted to move to Dubai. But I remember I was like, you know what? Let's sit and make a list of pros and cons. What are the pros of moving and not moving? And what are the cons of moving and not moving? And I think that's really, it might seem like it's such a business minded thing to do it. But like, if you really want to make a fundamental life decision when it comes to should I stay or should I go, or do I do this versus do I do that? Sit and think about how it's going to impact every avenue of your life that really, really matters to you. You know, and then based on that, you make the decision that would be sometimes it's really hard to make that decision because you're simply afraid. You know,
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm,
not just a failure, it's the fear of the unknown. It's an
mm-hmm,
uncharted to how am I going to know? How am I going to
mm-hmm.
do it? Like yeah, you'll be afraid if I'm going to fail. That's the natural thing. But then also the fact that I don't know. It's like, you know, when you want to, I love the sea, but the sea is very intimidating to me because I know that once I get to a point where I can't touch the bottom anymore, where I'm going to start getting worried about what's under my feet, what's going to be swimming around me. But you
Yeah.
know, at the same time, when I
Whew,
go into
goosebumps.
when I go into the water, there's also this sense of like it's refreshing my soul and I'm connecting and you know, it's just so good for me. The sun is hitting me, the salt water, you know. So there's that fear, should I swim further out or do I should I stay where my feet can still touch the ground? And I think it's a good analogy for anything in life. Oftentimes when we want to make a decision about really, really fundamental things, we have to sit and think about how is this going to impact my life, not just right now, but my future. Sometimes when we women tend to fall in love, we throw all caution to the wind and it's like, no, I'm just doing it based of that feeling and that emotion and how he makes me feel and what I have in my mind. But then maybe we haven't sat and thought about what is this going to look like once I'm really, really in it? Because
Mm,
the day to day of it is very different from what it feels like in my heart and in the butterflies in my stomach, right? So I think as we
yeah.
get older and we've kind of the decisions that we've made have negatively impacted us in a certain way, which have had positive outcomes later when it comes to wisdom and experience. It's the fact that when we want to make new decisions, we take what we did, we do more risk analysis. I
Yeah.
think it's when you're going to make big decisions in life, you really really have to sit and think about how is this going to impact my future? Because the decision that you make today is not just for today. The decision that you make today is going to impact you for tomorrow and many more tomorrows to come. And I think that's the mindset where I would just wanted to be in it at that moment and experience it then. But now when I think about it, no, like if you tell me to make a certain decision, it's funny. It's like when people who don't have kids and like if they want to make an impulsive decision, all right, tomorrow we're going to Mykonos. And then if you were to call me and be like, hey Bahari, let's go to Mykonos, I'm like, girl, I got a kid. I have shit to do. How am I? No, I can't pack my bag and come with you, right? But I
Yeah.
think a lot of guys also, guys who are married versus guys who are not married, like, you know, the
True.
dudes will be
Gotta check
like,
with my wife.
I gotta check with the ball and chain, gotta check with the missus. But it's
Yeah.
just every decision, it comes with a cost and a burden of responsibility. And as you get more seasoned in life, you kind of, again, intuition. We talked about this many episodes ago. Your gut will, if you listen to it, if you have the clarity of mind, if you have the clarity of soul, your gut, whatever your gut tells you, you will just listen to it and make the decision. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes decisions are that you need to cut people out of your life.
Yeah.
And that's not something easy to do. Sometimes you could really, really, really love someone, but the alignment is not there and they're a good person. They're a really, really good human being. But the decision to stay with them is going to impact your future in not the most fruitful way. So you have to make a decision to say, okay, my train stops here and I'm getting off.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard. It's hard. I've had to do that. It was not easy. And then I've had to do that, make that decision for some people, and it was very easy and very good, you know? And
Mhm.
sometimes maybe
Mhm.
they wanted to come and make amends, and I'm just like, nope, the
Yeah.
decision was made. It was final.
Yeah, I like that point because sometimes we think that that decision to kind of cut people off, whatever, it's that's because they're a bad person. It's not that. It's just values misalignment. Like it could be a million of other things that make us make that decision. It's not always the bad things that drive us to that decision. You know what I'm saying? It's just more of just there's other factors. Nothing that's an important differentiator because yeah, sometimes you have to make decisions that are hard because it's not like something dramatic or big has happened, but it's that there's this anchor, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying, that's gonna hold you back and this person or this thing might be the best in many ways, but then it's like, it's that yeah, it's just it's a good point because I think it doesn't always have to be this dramatic bad thing. Sometimes it's just even the good people and the good things that need to be let go.
I think it's you have to sit and think about what are the consequences of this decision that I'm going to be accountable for?
Mm,
Am I willing to be accountable for this? And when I take
mm-hmm.
accountability for this, if that person comes to me and says, "Why did you make this decision? Because it impacted me in an X and Y and Z way," I say, "Yeah, I take accountability for that." If my
Yeah.
daughter were to come and ask me, "Why did you make that decision? You decided to get divorced, and I grew up without a father in the home, and I grew up in a single mom household. Do I have the accountability to come and say, well, this is, yeah, you bet you I do.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I made the right decision for both of us because I would rather have her growing up. And I think my daughter, God bless her, is a very well rounded young girl. And I think I've been so lucky to have a family. Again, everything is interconnected and not everybody's story is of privilege. I think I have a lot of privilege I've had in my life because I have a family that lives close to me and we're such a tight knit. But if I'm talking about accountability, yes, I am accountable for the fact that I made the wrong decision and chose the wrong partner, out of which that partnership I got the right child. But then leaving that made me give her an experience that is missing a parent, right? So am I going to take full accountability of it? Yes, because ultimately I do believe that this is much better than growing up in a household where the two parents were just not good for each other and that would have had even worse consequences for her
Mm-hmm.
as a
Yeah.
young person and then as she grew up. So do I think I made the right decision? Yes, 100%. And I will take full accountability for it and for the mess ups. I think it takes a big person to be accountable. Holding yourself accountable is one thing. Other people holding you accountable is another. But holding yourself accountable to yourself requires a lot of work. And you have to do it on a daily basis because you're not the same person you were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't compete with other people. I used to. I used to always want to be, especially from a career perspective. I have never thought I was enough. But then the day I stopped and thought to myself, the only person that I should be competing with is who Bahari was last year, it kind of made things a lot easier. A lot easier in life because I have to answer to myself. I have to be accountable to myself. If I have this amount of money and I can go and blow it on a stupid thing, or I save it and I do something that will maybe bring me more abundance, I'm going to be accountable for that. So I think it's really, really important that we do self audits and we keep on thinking of all of the decisions we made, especially in the negative way. How did that decision impact me positively, even though it was a negative decision?
Mm. And it gives you a lot of power. When you're accountable, it gives you power, it gives you that control back. Because then, if you're accountable, then you know that you have some ownership on that decision. So then you can actually make a different decision later on because you took accountability and ownership of that decision. So when versus like blaming the external forces and then just blame, then it's like you're just giving up your power, giving up your control. And it's basically you don't have control of your life and decisions are being made on your behalf versus accountability gives you that power back.
I always think about, like, imagine somebody who is responsible for a big organization, or imagine if somebody is responsible for a country and they have to make decisions for decisions on things that impact the lives of so many different people. The
Mm,
amount of stress that goes into that, because you're not always, and this is another thing about decision making. In order to make the right decisions for yourself, you're going to let a lot of people down, right? Because what could
100%.
be serving you, your purpose and your truth, could disappoint other people. And I think, it's a personal opinion, I think sometimes in decision making, you're going to have to accept the fact that you're going to disappoint others and you're going to make them unhappy in the pursuit of making the right decision for yourself. So it's something you got to sit with, and got to be comfortable. You got to be comfortable with disappointing others, because you can't always be making everybody happy. You're not freaking Bozo the Clown, right? And you shouldn't be acting like you
Hmm.
live in a circus and work in a circus, because then that's just bananas. So you have to get comfortable. Decision making is something that has so many different layers to it. And depending on what area and arena of your life you're going to do it, you have to tackle it in a different way. But if the big takeaway of this week's episode is own your shit, stand firmly in it, if you mess up, you be the person that says, I messed up, instead of giving somebody the opportunity to come and say, hey, you messed up. There's so much power in that. If I walk up to you and I say, you know what, I messed up, at least I had the balls to say I did it.
Amen. And context matters.
Indeed.